Okay, I think this is rolling. Hey everybody. I know it's been a minute since I've done a video, and I know that every time I do a video, I start it out by saying it's been a minute since I've done a video, but I really did think it was important to kind of sit down and put something out tonight to talk about what's going on over in Iran. I know Venezuela has captured most of the headlines right now, but if you've read Advance to Contact, you know that I'm particularly interested with Iran, especially in the wake of the Iranian Revolution, the Islamic Revolution in 1979. So, what's going on in Iran right now? Well, it looks like they might be on the brink of another revolution, and this time it will be essentially undoing the what happened so many years ago. It's been over 50 years of rule by the Islamic Republic, and it looks like that might be coming to a close with a lot of luck. Okay, so what's going on? How did it start? What are we looking at? It started with a financial crisis, and essentially inflation in Iran year over year has been almost 50%, which basically we dealt with our own inflation crisis, and it was bad. Don't get me wrong. Inflation almost hit 10% under the early Biden years, and that was rough, and we all felt it. I mean, I felt it. I suppose some of you guys might be well off and didn't notice, the prices that went up and never really came back down. And if so, please purchase more of my books and give them to your friends as gifts. Help keep me afloat here. Help me, afford all that fancy caviar that I like to eat so much. But their currency, the real, is basically collapsed. It's becoming worthless, and this is partially, partially because of U.S. economic sanctions and Europeans. Everybody, not everybody, obviously, but many countries have placed sanctions on Iran because of their support for Hezbollah and Hamas. They're essentially pouring Iranian money into these organizations to fight a proxy war against Israel. Whether you support the Palestinians or you support Israel, it's not really germane to this conversation because we just really want to focus on what's going on in Iran. And so the merchant class in Iran, because their currency was worthless, basically closed all their shops in protest. Now, that protest has sort of spread out, and people have joined from all walks of life. And so, okay, a lot of you guys probably remember, like, say, for example, 2009, there were major protests in Iran. In 2022, that was the hijab protests, where the morality police had essentially beat a woman to death because she didn't properly wear her hijab. But those were different, and so I think that's really why is this current movement different than all the ones that we've seen in the past. So I think the first thing that makes this different is that most of the previous movements were contained to the urban areas. So downtown Tehran, this particular one, however, has moved into the suburbs, moved into the rural areas. Essentially, it's gone nationwide. And so that's going to make it a lot harder to put it down than just cracking down on a few square blocks. Second thing that makes this different is the Iranian regime doesn't have an economic solution. They really cannot fix this problem. And they can't even promise to fix this problem because those promises have been made before, and at this point, nobody believes them. And that really leaves the Iranian dictatorship with one last tool in their arsenal that they could use to counter this protest movement. And the United States, I believe, has just denied them that use. We declared that, and this is the President Donald Trump put on social media, that the U.S. would act if the Iranians crack down on the protesters. Normally, maybe you could say, yeah, but Trump's just all talk. Maybe you could say that, except he posted that the day before the United States went into Venezuela and removed the tyrant that was essentially had deposed or prevented from assuming power the true and elected representative of the people. So Maduro, who was essentially telling the people of Venezuela to pound sand when they literally voted him out of office, he's now being detained by the Americans. We have him. I think that coming on the heels of telling the Iranian regime that we would act, and of course, let's not forget when we bombed the holy hell out of their nuclear program and their air defense sectors, it basically has them on notice that, yeah, no, we mean it this time. And we mean it in a way that no American administration has meant it since 1979. Reagan had his own things to worry about. There was still a Cold War going on. Obviously, George H.W. Bush had, basically everybody's had reasons to not be so hardline against the Iranians. So I think that this final piece, this statement that we support them, is going to curtail them from using overwhelming force to crack down Tiananmen Square style. For those of you who remember 1989, I think, if nothing else, everybody probably remembers the Tank Man. That was a democratic protest in China that the Chinese let it go for a while and then sent in the tanks. And so I think that the statement from the president was to prevent that overwhelming force from being used. Okay, so that's what's happening. Where's it going to go? So if you're one of my personal friends, I've probably cornered you at a party and made you listen to this at least once, maybe twice. But ever since I was studying democratization movements during my undergraduate studies, I've always looked at Iran as being one of the beacons, one of the most likely places that could convert from a authoritarian to a democratic government. Some of it has to do with, and I guess specifically in this region. Right now in the region, we don't really have another functioning democracy. We have Israel, kind of a separate situation, but outside of Israel, we don't really have any functioning democracies. And some people might say Turkey, but I haven't really studied a lot of Turkey's democratic history. I haven't really been on their side as much as I have been on Iran's, but their current dictatorship is not remotely a democracy. Erdogan is an authoritarian thug who rules through intimidation and not through free and fair elections. In fact, even the OSCE won't sign off on his on Turkey's elections as being free and fair. They're more like Ukraine was between 92 and, say, 2012, where, yes, they technically had elections, but they weren't really free and they weren't really fair. And they were essentially, everybody knows, well, you know what, I'm just going to leave Ukraine out of this for now. But no, Turkey, I don't believe is a real functional democracy. Okay, so if I think that this could lead to there being an Iranian democracy, what does that look like? Well, I think in an ideal world, the heir to the Shah of Iran, who was run out in 1979 when the Ayatollah Khomeini, and trust me, I'm a Slav. I have 0% confidence that I get any of these Persian words right. But the Shah that got run out when the Iranian Revolution took over, his son, Reza Pahlavi, anyway, his son is a symbol of the Persian identity, of the Persian people. And I believe that as such, he can be a stabilizing force that can come in and oversee the transition to a democratic government. I don't think he wants to run the country. I don't think that he'd be particularly good at it. I don't think he's particularly qualified to. But I think that just as a symbol, he can be that stabilizing force that people can look to as they're building the new government. And I think it's interesting to me. It's kind of like how history may not repeat itself, but it does rhyme. His father was attempting to convert. Hey, my dog just joined me. His father was attempting to convert over to a parliamentary system when he got run out of town by the Islamic Revolution. And so it would be very poetic for his son, Reza, to come in and complete that kind of transition that his father wasn't able to. Now, to get specifically into what a Persian democracy might look like, I think this is going to surprise a lot of my readers, but Iran already has all of the underpinnings of a functional democracy. They have 3 branches of government, they have political parties, they have elections that are relatively free and fair. The difference, what they also have, is what's called the supreme leader. And the supreme leader sits atop their judicial, their judicial branch. And unlike in an American system where we have the separation of powers, the separation of powers is essentially, stops with the supreme leader, who has all the power. He can veto anything he wants. He can enact legislation that he wants. He basically is the authoritarian head of that government, and all of the things that are happening underneath are really just window dressing. In fact, that's one of the things that, before I studied it, I was really wondering, okay, why isn't this working? Because back then, from the, this was in the early 90s through our Middle East adventures in the mid 2000s. Hey, can you turn it down? Yep. The dog just came in here. So from the mid 80s, I'm sorry, start over again. From the 90s into our Middle East adventures in the mid 2000s, the Iranian people kept electing moderates to be the president, to be in the legislature. And so we were always like, okay, when are these moderates going to take over? And it was not understanding the structure of their government that basically said they can pass all the moderate laws they want. They can be as Western facing as they want, but they're never going to actually accomplish anything because the supreme leader gets to veto. I mean, if you want to try to make the analog in the US system, imagine that John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, runs the whole country, makes all the decisions until the day that he dies. And that's what they currently have. So I think the dumbed down version of what needs to happen is that you need to remove the supreme leader, obviously, and replace their guardian council, that's their judicial branch, with a secular court, and then work on reestablishing what the separation of powers looks like to essentially prevent another authoritarian takeover. I think that we have more reason to be optimistic about the Iranian government. We have more reason to be optimistic about the outlook and the fate of the Persian people than we have in the last 50 years. And I think it's really exciting. And I'm hoping that in the very near future, I'll be making another video where we can celebrate the downfall of what has been one of the most evil regimes on the earth in the last 50 years. So, thanks a lot, everybody.